to a special episode of Black Country History Hunter. Today we're doing a horror special. As you can see, we're in Newtown and the video starts as it ends with death. Brockmoor Church in the back. So today we're talking about Hanbury, Jeremiah Hanbury lived in Newtown most of his life. He had 7 brothers and sisters, so he came from a big family, and he was a puddler. Puddling was a hard job. It was often done by strong, intelligent men because it was a process whereas you had to use your skill. So you would, other machines, you would chuck the steel in and let it melt. It was a technology that did the hard work. But with puddling, the man had to be thinking man, because you had to look at the amounts of steel you were putting in, and it was a cleaner process and it was called puddling, because you would put iron bars in which were quite possibly contaminated from being made with iron and being made with coal, which was contaminating the steel when it was made in the furnace. You were putting just a pure iron in to an area, and then the gases from the fuel were affecting it, melting it and puddling it, making it a purer form of iron or steel. So that then would go on to be rolled or to be dropped forwards into whatever shape you wanted. Now, so he was a smart man and he was an hard-working man, but it turns out he was also a murderer. What made him a murderer? Well, as normally is the case, love. Now we're walking down Brockmoor High Street as we speak. Now he had family who lived in the High Street, and he himself lived in the High Street at one point, but then eventually he moved to Newtown, and that's where he eventually stayed. Now we're heading towards the pub on the route which he would have travelled that fateful day, 17th of October 1932. So several people acted as witnesses at the time in the courts, and basically 20 people went to the court at Birmingham, and they went on a shadow bang which is arranged by the courts, and they gave their statements. Some saw him travelling to the pub, some saw him in the pub. I think it was Jeremiah, no, what was his name? His surname Williams was in the pub anyway, and the pub used to be on the other side of the road, which I'll show you now. Obviously the pub's moved across since then. What happened was there were subsidence problems. So here's an original picture of the pub. You see there the subsidence is taking its toll and it's being crippled up. But the pub was knocked down eventually, and a new site was found on the opposite side of the road, which you can see. If I just tilt round over there, there's the new Brockmoor house, just there, and the old Brockmoor house is just where the fishing tackle shop is here. So this is where it stood on this corner, probably more towards the edge of the road. But yeah, it was knocked down in the end, sadly, and this is where he came on that day. Somebody actually saw him in the pub, and they said that he actually looked jovial as he left and in good frame of mind. No doubt by then he'd made the decision what he was going to do. Why he did what he did? Well, it's hard to say. It obviously comes down to what was happening with the love triangle at the time. The woman he murdered, Jessie Payne, she was a married woman. Her husband was a long-distance lorry driver or a lorry driver in the area for the steel firms. Obviously all the people in the area were involved in steel. It's a big industry at the time. You can see an image here of the steelworks in the area. So this is one of the steelworks where he would have worked as a puddler. Jeremiah would have worked. His father was also a puddler. And this is the route now I'm walking, which he would have walked that fateful day towards Lace Crescent, where he committed the horrific crime. So yeah, basically he walked this route. Jeremiah was a puddler, as I've already mentioned, and the area was full of steelworks. Yeah, why he did it? He was in love with Jessie Payne, and Jessie Payne in the end turned him away, so he was in love with her, and for a year or so he'd been visiting. He lost his job, did Jeremiah, and up until a certain point he was being very good with Jessie. He was giving a lot of money to Jessie, and he was buying a lot of gifts for Jessie. Now obviously Jessie's husband had no idea, being a lorry driver, what was going on. But at some point she said not to come to the door anymore. Jerry was turned away. He said to several people that she's turned me away and she will, you know, I will get my revenge. On one occasion he was heard to be muttering, Jerry said revenge, Jerry will have revenge, which is an awful thing to say, especially muttering to yourself. But so he carried on this fateful day to this route, down to Lace Crescent where Jessie Payne lived. The husband was not there at the time, he would have been at work. Jeremiah said in court that she had started seeing somebody else, and actually In the end, he pleaded insanity, but it wasn't to be taken as fact. In the end, the judge was that he was guilty, and he was sentenced to death by hanging, which was awful. But it's not as awful as what he did. I mean, I do like the fact that in those days he knew what he was doing. I mean, today a murderer is a coward in my mind. You know, you murder somebody and you go to jail for the rest of your life, and you end up living a good life inside. You know, because we get used to anything. You know, you can get used to living in a box and make it pleasurable. So the thing is, I think then at least he knew when he'd done that act and he walked down the street, he even cut his own throat in a vain attempt to kill himself, which then he went back on obviously and went through the court system, and I suppose he turned coward in the end, pleading not guilty. But it's good that he had his comeuppance, and the man that killed him is this man. Well, he was the executioner's assistant at the time, was Point. He was the last head executioner when executions were a thing, and he killed a lot of people, but the fact that he came into contact with Hanbury, for me, is amazing. Yeah, so now Hanbury's buried at the prison where he was killed, rightly so. Jesse Payne lived at the Leys being quite a new estate, just passing the church there. So yeah, being quite a new estate, you can see it here, and she lived at number 11, the Leys. We're walking down towards the Leys now. This is the route on that horrible day that Hanbury took. What he was thinking, I do not know. But whether he had the hammer on him, he must have had the cutthroat razor on him. But he walked this route, and would have crossed the bridge I'm about to cross, would have been flanked by factories at the time, and that would have been the rectory instead of an old people's home. So yeah, here you see the image of the house as it was. And yeah, it was an horrific sight that day. He was seen leaving the house by a woman, and the woman saw him covered in blood, and he shouted over to the woman, "I've done it, I've done for her. I've done it, I've done for her." And he was covered in blood, and the blood was on him from her and from himself. He cut his own throat. Obviously the woman screamed. The scream was such that it alerted a neighbour, who came out, and the husband of this neighbour then proceeded to the kitchen at the Leys, where he saw the dead body of the woman, the hammer and the cutthroat razor a few inches from her head. He saw hair on the hammer from the body. He saw the top plate of her braces or her false teeth sticking through her top lip. So she had been actually bashed to death with a hammer, and then her head had almost been cut off. And he actually stated that awful circumstance. There is a picture here actually, and I'm not sure if it is the actual picture of the body, but if it is, it's gruesome. We're just passing the Brockmoor foundry now, and this is still a remnant of the steel industry that once lay in the area. You can see there, they're hard at it there, building something or moving something. It's nice to see. It's totally changed from the days when my granddad was a roller, and obviously Mr. Hanbury was a puddler, and unfortunately murdered somebody. We're just approaching the Leys now, and on that day the police officer was called, and en route to Mrs. Payne's house he came down Hickman Road, which was just opposite where the Brockmoor house was, and there he saw Mr. Hanbury in the middle of the street holding his throat, which had been cut, and staggering up the street. And obviously this was distressing to see. And the police officer called him over and said, "What's the matter?" And he said, "I've done it, I've killed her, I've done for her." And the police officer then administered first aid for that throat cut at a house nearby. And then obviously for a cut on his finger as well, which he cut himself when he obviously cut his own throat or cut her throat, he administered first aid and proceeded to caution him for murder, even though he'd not seen the evidence, but he'd heard the story, and he cautioned him for murder. Now here we are. This is that last turning that Hanbury would have took into Leys Crescent, or Leys Road, or Leys Estate at the time. So he would have took this corner, and number 11 is just down there. So we'll walk down this road as he walked that day, and we will show the house here, number 11, and you can see there the brutal murder that he committed, and the poor lady that was murdered. Absolutely horrific. Okay, here we go. Number 11. On the map, it seems to be this one here that's quietly cut back. That kitchen there, you know,
this is the last few steps so they would have taken on that day. These were new houses at the time, nothing like this. Would have been gardens, and you know, they were happy to have that. You know, driveways. Cars were there, but not prevalent. There wouldn't have been many cars. Yeah, he turned this corner, come in this direction, no doubt on this side of the road with intent to kill. And okay, in there, he walked in there. He walked round the back gate into the kitchen and bashed poor Jessie Payne's head in. Horrific. Poor woman. After that, cut his own throat and walked away. And at the assizes, it was felt and sentenced to death, with 20 witnesses and several people from Brierley Hill area also there. But what's strange is the night before the murder, one of Jessie Payne's relatives had a dream. Well, it was actually the niece of Jeremiah. She had a dream that Jeremiah had murdered somebody. So she woke up screaming in the night, and the next day it happened. Whether or not it was premeditated and she discussed it with somebody, i.e. Jeremy, she knew the anguish going on. He obviously spoke to people about the fact that he was in love with her and that had done the dirty on him as such. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed the video. It's a horrific what happened. But yeah, our very own Brockmoor murder. And if this is the sort of stuff you enjoy, I will do more of it if you just comment. I'm looking at doing other murders in the area. Obviously nice, short, concise, you know, not too much information, just seeing the area, seeing the spots, you know, talking a little bit about the people involved and the history of the people involved. But yeah, thanks, please subscribe, like, and I'll see you on the next video, guys. Thanks for subscribing, thanks for watching, thanks for liking. And that Roman coin, I'm giving that away, so yeah, make sure you subscribe, and I'll be picking that in a week's time. So yeah, brilliant. See you soon. Thanks everybody.